So where we left off last time is where do we get the resources to grow? And you can decide to do it by yourself, uh, have external partners, or actually have some kind of partnership where it's actually mutual. And so, for example, in the cloud, it's very tough to go it alone. Not very many companies have the resources for it. Dropbox actually has 45 technical partners and several third-party developers, and it's because in order to have a platform, you need content, and it's tough to do it all on your own, especially when other people do things better than you. So in terms of your enterprise, you set long-term objectives, whether it's your targets, your strategy, how are you going to manage your CRM, and you're looking for those high market growth places where you can get like 20%. In terms of going international, essentially your international strategy is, do you focus on things regionally? Do you try to enter new markets? What kind of resources can you bring to bear? And what kind of timeline are you looking at? And an example is Apple in China. Despite the tax breaks and everything, Apple's not going to bring back manufacturing its iPhone back to the United States. Not when they can get people in China to work 60 hours a week for $4.50 an hour. Not only that, but this is what the Chinese do. You're talking about like 20, 30,000 workers. That's kind of a tough thing to do in the United States, to find that many people who are going to be skilled and work for that kind of wage. It's not what we do here. What we do here, though, is advanced manufacturing, and this is where we need to retrain our workforce. In terms of revenue expansion, there are a number of other sources that you begin to look at, such as economies of scope. Depending on the uptime of your equipment, can I get more? Maintenance and spares, co-promotions, complement products. Oh, and I actually have two of them there. Anyway, in terms of enterprise management, when you're in growth mode, again, you're shifting from operations. You're not a product development company anymore. Now you're more concerned about things like supply chain, quality control, and enterprise systems. So here's a chart which pretty much explains your supply chain, and that's controlling your flow of goods and services, starting from raw materials all the way up to inventorying it, to delivering it, and also handling any kind of returns or customer support. An example of how extensive supply chain can get, the Boeing 787, as you can see, parts are coming in from all over the world. They're not all made in the United States. And why do they do that? Well, it's because somebody else in the world can do a better job than the United States. And better job doesn't necessarily mean quality. It can also mean cost. And when you think about how heavy these parts are and how big these parts are, they got to be pretty darn good, for you to pay the freight to come back. In terms of quality systems, it's about 6 and Lean Sigma, CGMP, which is good manufacturing practices. This is typically used by the biomedical industry. CGMP is a lot like ISO, the International Standards Organization. And finally, there are other kinds of standards, such as Underwriters Laboratory, which you see on all the electrical stuff, for CE, which is also biomedical. Now, the thing about these quality systems is quality is a bit of a misnomer, meaning you can have quality for a concrete boat, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's something useful. All quality means is traceability, that every last little procedure has been qualified. I've been through the ISO process, and it's not fun. I mean, things like procedures for how technicians put on booties and things like that, that's what you have to deal with in quality elements. But what it comes down to is you need a policy, you need objectives, and you need a manual. You need documentation. And so these are the elements that go into a quality system. In terms of enterprise management, and it took companies actually quite a long time before they really got it right. But you have a large volume of data that you need to share among all phases of your organization. And so how are you going to store it? How are you going to process it? how can you look at it? And so what it comes down to is you're exercising your product, your quality, and support. Tesla. This is going to make or break Tesla. Can they actually execute? The thing is, Elon Musk doesn't have experience in this stuff. So what did he do? He hired the people who can do this kind of stuff. And so we'll see if Tesla can make its goals or not. Some people are skeptical. Some people say they're the company that's going to dominate the next 100 years. On the other hand, their autopilot crashed. And they have lots of reasons why it wasn't their fault. And it probably wasn't. However, those kind of things sully the brand. Solyndra, $100 million loan. They severely underestimated how fast the price was dropping, and it dropped below what they could offer. And poof. Taurus. The Ford Taurus was the number one mid-size car of the 90s. And what mechanics told me is it made them rich. Which is why the Taurus did not stay the number one mid-size car. It's the Toyota Camry. And this is where seasoned people help you. I mean, innovative companies make fun of old stodgy companies, but these people do serve a purpose, and it's if you're more mature. Now, in terms of acquisitions or merger, the question is your new acquisition going to create growth with you? Can you combine the two pieces and improve performance? Can you have access to new customers? And can you get new product classes? An example, and some of my students might remember this from 310, although I forget if I did this online or in class. But there was one case called Roundtree Chocolate. And Roundtree Chocolate, they made Cadbury, and they also make Kit Kat. And what happened is the Nestle company wanted to acquire them. And they paid a premium, and everybody thought you were nuts to pay that much for them. But this is what Roundtree didn't do well. Roundtree was not a good international marketer. They basically sold well in England and maybe a little bit in Europe, and that's about it. Nestle is an international brand. They know how to sell. And so the reason why they paid a premium is because they believed that if you combine our distribution with your good product of chocolate, we'll make this explode. And that's where both sides bring something to the table to create a new kind of synergy. And subsequently, Nestle made out very, very well on that deal. You have to think about how your acquisitions are going to fit into your entire company. This is the one thing that scares me with all that cash floating around. Companies are unimaginative. What are they going to do? They're going to go out and just buy things. And then what always happens, it doesn't work, and then they spin it off. I look at HP. They buy Compaq, and now they split the company. Barnes & Noble and Best Buy. A lot of companies criticize them for not being innovative, but part of the problem is that they had leases on all these properties and all. They were kind of limited in what they could do, so they kept pushing it way too long because they needed to justify having that investment. And so the 70s and 80s was all about acquisitions and mergers and acquisitions and people paying ridiculous prices for companies. And is that necessarily a good idea? Like Microsoft, Nokia, does anybody remember the flip? In terms of going global, what is your strategy? And there are three different kinds of strategy when you're talking about international. You could be ethnocentric, which means you're focusing on a region. Uber is basically contained to cities. Uber is not going to move out to the suburbs, although they do to a certain degree. Bojangles is a localized chain, like chicken and waffles in the South, and they're trying to expand outwards. Are you geocentric, meaning there are places in the globe that you want to go? Schlumberger is an oil exploration company. They get teams of people together, and you go out, and I actually interviewed with them, and you go out into the middle of nowhere and look for oil. The thing that's interesting about them is when you're international, they give you a pay bump from 1 to 2x, so you can earn double your salary. And I just asked them, what do you get for 2x? And they said, if somebody dies in the job before you, you get double. And polycentric means that, to begin with, our entire strategy is about enveloping the globe. And so here are some examples of, this is a little dated, but you see how much international that Apple is got to depend on. And this is where some people are wondering, is Apple going to slow down? And that's that you can only sell so many phones to people, and then the Chinese market becomes tapped out, and where do they go next? In terms of digital growth, every time somebody touches your product, you leave a digital trail. And so by following that, you can see what people's preferences are. Every byte is an indicator of behavior, and your interactions are going to change over time, and so you have to be able to adapt to that. Here are some variable categories of different predictors for your customers that people look at. And there are hundreds of data points that you could look at and that define you. And so I just posted them here, and you can look at it. And so you could see which ones apply to you. And we'll leave off with this example before I go to the last video. And which of these are good or bad customers? Moms for a sharing network app, teens and clothes, and 20 to 35-year-old males and life insurance. Well, evidently the life insurance is not a good market, because when you're young, you think you're going to live forever. What do I need insurance for? Moms share everything. They all talk to each other. And so my daughter, mother of 6, has her own mom's group, and they all trade things, and they all tell each other things. And so that's a network you want to hit into. This is what I mean by with your products. And I talked about clusters and how it's going to expand to making a map. This is what I was referring to. Teenagers and clothes, well, that's kind of a no-brainer, because teens look at each other and they all talk. So we'll wrap up the rest of this in the next lecture.